The little black girl hid beneath the stairs, begging the biker, while someone banged on a door searching for her. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into this intense and dramatic story. It all starts in a small, dark house tucked away on a quiet street, where a little girl is hiding, trembling with fear. Her heart races as she listens to the loud, angry banging on the front door. Someone is looking for her. She hides beneath the stairs, clutching her knees to her chest, tears streaming down her face. She doesn't know what to do. She's terrified, knowing that the person banging on the door is the last person she wants to see. Her stepfather, a man she fears more than anything in this world, is out there. He's drunk, angry, and looking for her. His voice is like thunder as it echoes through the walls of the house, calling her name, demanding she come out. She presses her hands over her ears, trying to block out his shouts, but they cut through her like a knife. It's not the first time he's come after her, and it won't be the last. She's tried running before, but every time, he finds her. This time, though, she has a plan. She remembers the bikers she's heard about, the ones her father used to talk about, the ones who promised to protect her if anything ever happened. She's desperate, so she runs to the one place she knows might offer safety. As she bursts out of the house, her bare feet hit the cold pavement, and she doesn't stop running. Her heart is pounding in her chest as she looks over her shoulder, hoping to see the one thing that could save her, a biker. She doesn't know which one, but she hopes any of them will be there. She reaches a small diner on the corner, a place where she's seen the bikers gather. Her small body is shaking as she steps inside, her eyes scanning the room. She doesn't see them at first, but then she spots him, a tall man in a leather jacket sitting alone at the counter. His face is weathered, his eyes sharp. He's one of them. She rushes over to him, her voice cracking as she whispers, "Please, you have to help me. My stepdad is coming. He's going to hurt me." The man doesn't hesitate. He stands up, his movements calm but purposeful. He tells her to stay close and walks toward the door. The sound of engines revving fills the air as the other bikers start to gather outside. The little girl doesn't know what's going to happen next, but for the first time that night, she feels a glimmer of hope. Her stepfather might be out there, but now, so are the bikers. They're here to protect her. The roar of the motorcycles filled the air as the bikers made their way down the dark street, their engines cutting through the silence like a storm. The little girl, barely able to comprehend what was happening, clutched the biker's jacket, her heart racing faster than ever. Her body trembled with fear, but there was a small flicker of hope in her chest. For the first time that night, she felt like she wasn't alone. She wasn't sure where they were going or how they would stop him, but she knew one thing for sure. These bikers weren't about to let her down. As the biker led her toward his bike, the others gathered around, their movements coordinated like a well-oiled machine. Each of them knew their role, and they were ready to play it. The leader, a man with weathered skin and a deep, gravelly voice, pulled his helmet on and nodded at her. "Get on. We're going to keep you safe." She didn't hesitate, climbing onto the back of the bike as the engine roared to life beneath her. The rest of the bikers followed suit, their bikes lining up behind the leader as they rode out into the night. The city lights flickered as they passed, the streets growing emptier the further they went. She could hear the wind whipping past her, but it was the sound of the engines that drowned out the rest. For a moment, she forgot about the fear and the anger that had haunted her for so long. It was just the hum of the road, the rhythmic roar of the motorcycles, and the knowledge that someone strong, was there to protect her. As they rode through the winding streets, the biker beside her turned his head, his eyes scanning the road ahead. "We're not going to stop until we get to the safe house," he said. She nodded, her small fingers gripping the leather tightly. She didn't know what a safe house was, but she didn't care. She just wanted to be away from him, away from the man who had made her life a nightmare. Her stepfather had always been a shadow in her life, looming over her, threatening to break her down at every turn. He wasn't just abusive. He was cruel, unpredictable, and violent. Every day, She lived in fear that he would snap and hurt someone she loved, and most of the time, that someone was her. The memory of his face, twisted in anger, flashed in her mind. She could still hear his shouts echoing through the walls. "Where is she?" he had screamed. "She can't run forever." But she had run. She had made it out. And now, with the bikers by her side, she felt like she had a chance. She turned her head slightly, looking back at the line of bikes behind them. They were a team, united, and they were here for her. She hadn't been sure what to expect when she ran to them. She thought they might turn her away, or worse, ignore her. But instead, they had surrounded her with nothing but protection and support. She didn't know these men, but they had become her family. "How far is it?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the noise of the engines. The biker beside her glanced over his shoulder, a reassuring smile on his face. "Not far. Just hang tight." The sound of the engines reverberated in the air as they sped through the streets. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a soft glow over the city. The world seemed different now, quieter somehow. It felt like they were moving through a dream. As the bikes continued their journey, she thought about what was waiting for her on the other side. The safe house. A place where she could finally escape. A place where she could heal. The leader of the bikers spoke again, his voice steady but filled with conviction. "We'll get you out of this. You're not alone anymore." She didn't know how he knew, but she believed him. For the first time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she would be okay. The ride felt like an eternity, but in a way, it was a release. Every mile, every turn, felt like a step further from the nightmare that had been her life. The bikes tore through the night, like a storm chasing away the darkness, and she felt it, the sense that she was finally moving towards safety. Ahead, she saw the faint outline of a building, a place where she could finally be free. The bikers slowed as they approached the entrance, their lights cutting through the darkness. They pulled into the lot, parking in a tight formation. The leader got off his bike and turned to her. "We're here. You're safe now." She looked around, taking in her new surroundings. The safe house was a modest building, tucked away from the world, a place of quiet and protection. She wasn't sure what would come next, but for now, she felt a sense of peace. The nightmare had ended, and she was free. The little girl stepped off the bike, her legs feeling wobbly but her heart racing with relief. The safe house was small, tucked away in a quiet corner of town, a place where no one would think to look. The bikers had done what they promised. They had brought her to safety, but now, as she stood there in the dim light, she realized that her journey was far from over. She could still hear her stepfather's voice in her mind, shouting, threatening, promising to find her no matter where she ran. But here, in this moment, she was free. The door of the safe house creaked open, and a woman stepped out. She was older, with kind eyes that immediately softened as she looked at the little girl. "You must be Maya," the woman said gently, her voice warm. "I'm Clara. I've been expecting you." Maya nodded but didn't speak. She wasn't sure what to say. After everything, words seemed so small. Clara stepped forward, holding out her hand. "Come inside, sweetheart. You're safe now." Maya hesitated, but only for a moment. She had been through too much, and this woman's gentle manner gave her the courage to step inside. The bikers who had brought her here lingered in the yard, their motorcycles lined up like a fortress. The leader, the one with the scarred face, gave her a reassuring nod before turning away. "We'll be right outside, Maya," he said, his voice low but firm. "We won't let anything happen to you." Maya's chest tightened, but she couldn't help the small sense of peace that began to settle over her. She had never felt so protected before, and it was a feeling she hadn't even known she could have. Clara led her inside, where the warmth of the house enveloped her. The air smelled of fresh bread and something sweet baking in the oven. It was a far cry from the cold, damp house she had run from. Clara guided Maya to a small room with a single bed covered in soft blankets. "You can rest here tonight," Clara said, her voice soft. "I'll bring you some food. You must be starving." Maya nodded, her stomach growling in agreement. Clara smiled and left the room, and Maya sat down on the bed, letting out a deep breath. She looked around, taking in the simple but cozy space. There was a small window with curtains drawn, and a desk with books stacked neatly. It was peaceful, almost like a dream. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the exhaustion of the past few hours catch up to her. But just as she was about to drift off, there was a knock at the door. Clara stepped in, holding a tray of food. "I thought you might be hungry," she said with a kind smile. Maya's eyes widened at the sight of the warm meal. She hadn't had anything to eat since the morning. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice shaky. Clara sat down next to her, setting the tray on the bed. "You don't have to thank me," she said softly. "We're here to help." Maya looked down at the food but didn't eat right away. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if he finds me?" Clara's heart ached as she looked at the little girl beside her. "He won't find you here," Clara said firmly. "You're safe now, and we're going to make sure it stays that way." Maya's eyes filled with tears again. She wanted to believe Clara, wanted to feel safe, but the fear still gnawed at her. The fear that her stepfather would find a way to get to her, that all this would be for nothing. Clara placed a gentle hand on Maya's shoulder. "You don't have to be alone anymore," she said softly. "You have people who will protect you now, and we'll make sure you get the help you need to heal." Maya wiped her eyes and finally picked up the fork. She took a bite, the warm food comforting her in a way she hadn't realized she needed. Clara stayed with her for a while, talking softly about the house and how things worked. As the minutes passed, Maya felt herself relax. For the first time in what felt like forever, she wasn't looking over her shoulder, afraid of what might happen next. She could finally breathe. But even as she finished her meal, her thoughts drifted back to her stepfather. What would happen when he found out she was gone? Would he come after her? Would the bikers be enough to stop him? The questions swirled in her mind, but for now, she decided to push them aside. For now, she was safe, and that was enough. The next few days at the safe house passed in a blur. Maya spent most of her time resting, eating when Clara brought her meals, and trying to process everything that had happened. There was a strange sense of calm in the house, but the fear of what might come next never completely left her. She couldn't shake the image of her stepfather's face, twisted with rage, the memory of his shouts echoing in her mind. The bikers were still around, keeping watch over the house and making sure she stayed safe, but she couldn't help but wonder how long they would be able to protect her. Late one afternoon, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, the sound of motorcycles echoed in the distance. Maya stiffened, her heart skipping a beat. Clara noticed the look on her face and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "It's okay," Clara said softly. "They're just checking in." Maya nodded but couldn't shake the anxiety that crept up her spine. She had learned to trust the bikers, especially the one who had brought her to safety, but the thought of her stepfather still loomed over her. She couldn't help but wonder how far he would go to find her. Just as she was about to settle back into the chair by the window, the doorbell rang. It was a sharp, urgent sound, breaking the quiet of the house. Clara moved quickly to answer it, and Maya's breath caught in her throat. She held her breath as the door opened, and in stepped one of the bikers, the leader, the one with the scarred face. He looked serious, his eyes scanning the room as he stepped inside. "Is she okay?" he asked Clara, his voice low and steady. Clara nodded. "She's fine for now, but we're all on edge." The biker turned to Maya, his eyes softening when he saw her. "How are you holding up?" he asked, his tone surprisingly gentle. Maya bit her lip and looked down at her hands. She didn't know how to answer. She wanted to say she was fine, that she was safe, but the truth was, she still felt lost. "I'm okay," she whispered. The biker nodded and pulled up a chair. "We've been keeping an eye out, but there's something we need to talk about. Your stepfather, he's not going to stop. We need to make sure we're ready for whatever comes next." Maya's heart sank at the mention of her stepfather. She had been trying to push the thought of him out of her mind, but hearing his name made it all too real again. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The biker leaned forward, his face hardening with resolve. "We'll stay one step ahead, but we need to be ready. If he comes for you, we'll be ready to fight. But it's not just about protecting you. It's about making sure he can never hurt you again." Maya felt a flicker of hope, but also fear. She had no idea what to expect, and she didn't want anyone else to get hurt because of her. "What if he finds me?" she asked, her voice trembling. The biker placed a reassuring hand on her arm. "He won't find you here, but we're going to make sure of that. We've got a plan." Maya looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and gratitude. She didn't know how this would play out, but she trusted these bikers more than anyone else. "Thank you," she said softly. The biker nodded. "Don't thank us yet. The real work is just beginning." But we're not going to let him take you back. Not while we're breathing. He stood up, motioning for Clara to join him. We're going to start preparing. We'll need everything in place before he shows up. Clara nodded and followed him to the door, leaving Maya alone in the quiet room. Maya stood by the window, looking out at the street. The peaceful scene outside seemed so far removed from the chaos she had just escaped. But she knew the calm wouldn't last forever. Her stepfather was still out there, and if there was one thing she had learned, it was that people like him didn't give up easily. The bikers were right. She had to be ready. For what? She didn't know. But one thing was certain. They weren't going to let her face it alone. The next morning, Maya woke up to the sounds of the bikers preparing for the day. The house was quiet, but the atmosphere was heavy with tension. She stood by the window, looking out at the bikes lined up in the yard. The bikers were getting ready, checking their equipment, talking in hushed voices. The leader, the one with the scarred face, was giving orders, his voice low but firm. Maya couldn't help but feel a sense of safety just watching them. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was part of something bigger, something that cared about her. She had never felt like that before. Her stepfather had always made her feel small, insignificant, as though she was just another problem for him to deal with. But these bikers, they made her feel important, like her safety mattered. Clara came into the room, bringing her a cup of hot tea. "Good morning," she said, her smile warm. "How did you sleep?" Maya hesitated for a moment before answering. "I slept okay. I think I'm just still scared." Clara sat down beside her on the bed. "It's okay to be scared," she said softly. "You've been through a lot. But remember, you're not alone anymore. You have people who will protect you, who will make sure you're safe." Maya nodded, trying to take in Clara's words. But the fear was still there, gnawing at her. What if her stepfather found her? What if all of this was for nothing? She pushed the thoughts aside, focusing on the sound of the bikes revving outside. She had to trust the bikers. She had to trust that they would keep her safe. A few minutes later, the leader of the bikers, whose name was Jack, came inside. He looked at Maya, his expression serious. "We need to talk," he said. Maya stood up, her heart pounding in her chest. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice trembling. "We've been getting some intel," Jack said, his tone calm but urgent. "Your stepfather is getting closer. He's been asking around about you, and he's got people looking for you. We need to move fast." Maya's stomach dropped. She had known this moment would come, but hearing it out loud made it feel real. Jack continued, "We've arranged for a safe route. We'll be moving you to a different location, somewhere your stepfather won't think to look. But we need to do it now, before he gets too close." Maya felt her heart race. The thought of leaving the safe house, the only place she had felt safe in days, terrified her. "Are you sure it's safe?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack nodded. "We've planned every detail. You'll be with us the whole time. We'll get you there safely." He paused for a moment, then added, "But we need to move quickly. The longer we wait, the more dangerous it becomes." Maya didn't know what to say. Her mind was racing, her body frozen in place. She wanted to run, to hide, but she also knew that if she stayed, her stepfather would find her. She had to leave. She had to trust these bikers. "Okay," she said, her voice small but determined. "I'll go." Jack gave her a small, reassuring smile. "Good. We'll take care of the rest. You just stay close, and we'll make sure nothing happens to you." With that, the bikers began to prepare for the move. Maya followed Clara out of the room, her heart beating loudly in her chest. As she stepped outside, she saw the bikers loading their bikes, checking their gear, and getting ready for the journey ahead. The leader, Jack, gave her one last look, his eyes steady. "We're ready when you are," he said. Maya nodded, taking a deep breath. She wasn't sure what was going to happen next, but she knew that she couldn't stay in the safe house forever. She had to keep moving, keep running. And with the bikers by her side, maybe, just maybe, she could finally escape the nightmare that had been chasing her. They all mounted their bikes, the engines roaring to life. Maya climbed onto the back of Jack's bike, feeling the weight of everything that had happened settle over her. The wind whipped through her hair as they pulled away, the world speeding by in a blur. She didn't know where they were going, but for the first time in days, she felt a glimmer of hope. She wasn't alone anymore. The bikers had her back, and maybe, just maybe, she could finally be free. The journey had only just begun, but Maya could already feel the weight of what was happening. The bikers rode in tight formation, their engines humming like a single living entity, cutting through the darkened roads. She sat behind Jack, holding onto him tightly as the wind whipped around her. The world was a blur of motion, but her thoughts kept returning to the same place. The fear of her stepfather, the man who had controlled her life for so long. He would stop at nothing to find her. Maya's heart pounded with each passing mile. Every shadow in the distance seemed like a potential threat. The noise of the motorcycles was the only thing that kept her from spiraling into panic. It felt like the world was pressing in on her, but she didn't dare let go of Jack. His steady presence gave her a sense of security, even if she couldn't shake the feeling of being hunted. As they rode through the quiet streets of the town, Maya caught glimpses of familiar places: the grocery store, the park where she used to play as a child. Each place felt like a memory she could never return to. They were leaving everything behind, and though she didn't know what lay ahead, the thought of escaping her stepfather brought a flicker of hope to her heart. Jack's voice broke through her thoughts. "We're almost there," he said, his voice calm and reassuring. "Stay close, Maya. We'll get you to safety." She nodded, though she could barely find her voice. She just focused on the rhythm of the ride, the way the motorcycle moved beneath her, and the quiet hum of the engines that seemed to carry them away from everything. They turned off the main road and onto a smaller path, leading them away from the town. The trees began to thicken on either side, and the road grew darker, the only light coming from the headlamps of the bikes. It felt like they were entering a new world, one that was safer, at least for now. Maya couldn't help but look over her shoulder, even though she knew they were too far from the town for anyone to follow them immediately. "Are we really safe?" she asked softly, her voice barely audible over the roar of the motorcycles. Jack glanced back at her. "We're taking precautions. Don't worry." But his voice didn't sound entirely convincing, and Maya's worry only grew. The silence between them felt heavy as they continued down the path. Maya's mind raced with possibilities, each one worse than the last. What if her stepfather found out where she was? What if the bikers couldn't protect her? What if they weren't enough? She was trying to suppress the anxiety building in her chest, but it was hard to ignore. The path seemed to go on forever, and the further they traveled, the more isolated they became. There was no one here, just the sound of the motorcycles and the occasional rustle of the wind through the trees. Finally, the bike slowed as they approached a small, hidden cabin tucked away in the woods. It was simple but sturdy, surrounded by tall trees and thick underbrush. Maya felt a slight relief as they pulled into the clearing, though she couldn't help but glance around nervously. Jack stopped the bike and helped her off, his hand steady as he guided her toward the cabin. "This is it," he said. "This is where you'll be safe for now." The door creaked open, and another biker, a woman with short dark hair and a serious expression, stepped out. "Everything's secure," she said, giving Jack a quick nod before turning her attention to Maya. "Come on in. We'll get you settled." Maya stepped inside, the warmth of the cabin enveloping her. It was small but comfortable, with a fireplace crackling softly in the corner and a few simple pieces of furniture scattered around the room. There was a bed in the corner, a small kitchen area, and a table with a few chairs. It wasn't much, but it was better than what she had been running from. "You'll stay here," the woman said, gesturing to the bed. "I'll make sure you have everything you need. You're safe here, Maya." The words were reassuring, but Maya still felt a pang of doubt. She wanted to believe them. She really did, but the fear was hard to shake. She sat down on the bed, glancing around the room. The cabin felt like a temporary refuge, and that made her wonder what would happen next. Would her stepfather find her here? Would the bikers be able to protect her? The woman noticed the look on her face and sat down beside her. "I know it's scary," she said gently, "but we're going to make sure you're safe. We're not letting him take you back. Not now, not ever." Maya nodded, trying to find comfort in her words. It was just hard to imagine a future where her stepfather wasn't part of the equation, where she wasn't constantly looking over her shoulder. She wanted to believe she could start over, but the past had a way of following her, and she wasn't sure how to escape that. As the night settled in, she lay back on the bed, staring up at the ceiling. For the first time in a long time, she felt exhausted, mentally and physically. She had been running for so long, and now, finally, she was somewhere that felt like it could be safe. But even as sleep pulled her under, the anxiety gnawed at her. Her stepfather was still out there, and no matter how hard she tried to push it away, The fear of what he might do next lingered in her mind. The next morning, the cabin felt different. The light filtered through the trees, casting soft shadows on the walls. Maya lay in the bed, her mind still racing, but her body exhausted from everything she had been through. She hadn't slept well, constantly waking up to the sound of her own breath, half expecting to hear the heavy footsteps of her stepfather coming up the porch steps. The bikers had kept watch overnight, their presence outside a silent promise of protection. She didn't know where they had gone, but she trusted that they would return soon. Clara had told her to stay inside the cabin, and she did, but every sound outside made her tense. It wasn't the world she was used to, and she still felt like she was on the edge of something, like the danger was still out there, waiting. She stood up, stretching her tired limbs. The morning air felt crisp as she stepped outside, her bare feet brushing against the cool ground. She walked to the edge of the cabin, looking out into the woods. The sunlight was creeping through the trees, and the world felt so still, so peaceful. For the first time in a long time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, this could be her new normal. Maybe she could learn to live without the constant fear. But then, the sound of an approaching engine broke the silence. Maya froze, her heart racing. She turned to see the familiar sight of the bikers' motorcycles coming down the path. They were back. Her stomach tightened, and she quickly went back inside, feeling her heart skip a beat. The door opened, and Jack stepped inside, his face serious. "We need to talk," he said. Maya nodded, her throat tight with anxiety. She had been hoping for a moment of peace, but now it seemed that her past was still catching up with her. Jack's eyes softened as he saw the worry on her face. "It's okay," he said, his voice reassuring. "We've got some news. Your stepfather is still looking for you. He's been asking around, and he's getting closer." Maya's stomach churned. She had known this was coming, but hearing it out loud felt like a punch to the gut. She had hoped that, for once, she could catch a break. Jack continued, "We're going to move you again to a different location. We've got some contacts who can help us, but we need to do it fast." Maya looked down at her hands, trembling. The thought of leaving again, of running again, made her feel like a prisoner. But she knew there was no choice. If she stayed here, her stepfather would find her, and this time, there would be no escape. "How long until we leave?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "A few hours," Jack said. "We'll get you to safety, Maya. I promise." She nodded, though the uncertainty gnawed at her. She wasn't sure if she could believe that promise, not with the way her life had been upended so many times. The thought of moving again made her feel sick, but she had no choice. Jack gave her a small smile. "We're doing everything we can. You're not alone in this. We'll keep you safe." She wished she could believe him completely, but the fear still lingered, the same fear that had been with her for so long. But the way Jack said it, the way he looked at her, made her want to trust him. She took a deep breath and stood up, ready to face whatever came next. They weren't going to let her down. As the hours passed, the bikers packed up their things and prepared for the move. Maya stayed inside, trying to stay calm, though the anxiety was rising in her chest. Clara came by to check on her, offering her a comforting smile. "You're doing great," Clara said. "We're almost there. Just a little longer, and you'll be somewhere safe. It won't be forever, and then you can breathe again." Maya smiled weakly, though she didn't feel like she could breathe just yet. She was ready to be somewhere safe, but she couldn't shake the fear that still gripped her. When the time came, they packed everything quickly. The bikers made sure everything was ready to go, checking their equipment one last time. Maya climbed onto Jack's bike again, her heart racing. It felt like a repeat of what happened before, only this time, she was more aware of the stakes. As they rode away from the cabin, the sounds of the forest slowly faded behind them, replaced by the steady hum of the engines. Maya clung to Jack, trying to keep her nerves in check, but everything felt uncertain. She wanted to believe they would keep her safe, but she couldn't help but feel like something was about to go wrong. The road stretched out before them, the landscape changing as they moved further from the town. The quiet, peaceful surroundings felt like a different world, and for a moment, Maya let herself believe that this was where she belonged. Maybe there was hope after all, but deep down, she knew that the danger wasn't over. It was only a matter of time before her stepfather found them, and she wasn't sure if they could outrun him forever. But now, she was with people who cared about her, who would do whatever it took to protect her. And that was enough to keep her going, one step at a time. The ride felt longer this time. As they sped through the open roads, Maya couldn't help but feel like the walls were closing in on her. Each turn, each passing tree, felt like a step away from everything she had known, but also a step deeper into the unknown. She was still with Jack, clinging to him as they rode, but something in her heart wasn't settled. Her mind kept racing back to her stepfather. The thought of him finding her, even here, made her insides twist with fear. He had always been unpredictable, always able to find a way to break through her defenses. What if he found them? What if all of this was for nothing? She tightened her grip on Jack, trying to suppress the anxious thoughts. She couldn't let them control her. She had to believe that this time would be different. Jack's steady presence beside her offered a small comfort, but even that wasn't enough to shake the fear that kept clawing at her. As the bikers rode on, they eventually took an exit off the highway, heading down a smaller, more secluded road. The trees seemed to close in around them, and the world grew quieter. The farther they went, the more isolated it felt. Maya glanced around, noticing how different this place was from the town she had fled. There were no streetlights, no signs of life, just the road and the wild woods around them. They were headed toward a place that was meant to be safe, but Maya still couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. After what seemed like hours, the group finally slowed down and pulled off the road into a small clearing. Maya's heart skipped a beat as she saw the cabin ahead of them. It wasn't much, just a small, weathered building surrounded by tall trees, but it felt like a world away from the chaos she had escaped. Jack dismounted first, his boots hitting the ground with a firm thud. He turned to help Maya off the bike, his hands steady as ever. "We're here," he said. Maya looked up at the cabin, unsure of what to feel. It looked like a safe place, but the anxiety still gnawed at her. The bikers had said they would protect her, but what if it wasn't enough? What if her stepfather found a way to break through their defenses? Jack led her inside, the door creaking open to reveal a small, cozy space. There was a fire burning in the hearth, a few chairs scattered around a wooden table, and a couple of worn-looking beds. It wasn't fancy, but it was warm and inviting. Maya looked around, taking in the simplicity of it all. This was a place of safety, a place where she could finally rest, but the fear still lingered, just beneath the surface. The sound of motorcycles outside reminded her that this was temporary. The bikers would keep watch, but Maya knew her stepfather wouldn't stop. He wouldn't stop until he found her, until he took back control. Jack noticed the look on her face and gave her a reassuring smile. "You're safe here, Maya," he said. "We've got you. No one's getting through." Maya nodded, trying to believe him. The weight of the world seemed to rest on her shoulders, and she wasn't sure how much more she could take. The silence between them was thick with unspoken thoughts. She didn't want to be a burden, but she also didn't want to be left alone with the fear that still gripped her. Jack's voice broke the silence. "I know you're scared," he said gently, "but you're not alone in this. We're in this together, okay?" Maya swallowed hard, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to spill over. She had been alone for so long, trapped in a cycle of fear and violence. She wasn't used to having someone on her side. "Okay," she whispered, her voice trembling. Jack gave her a soft nod and walked over to the window, peering out at the surrounding woods. "We'll stay here for a few days, lay low," he said, his voice steady. "We've got eyes on everything. Don't worry." Maya felt a strange sense of comfort in his words, even though the fear still lingered. She sat down on one of the chairs, wrapping her arms around herself. Jack went to the stove and started making something to eat, the smell of food filling the cabin. Maya couldn't remember the last time she had eaten a proper meal. Her stomach growled, reminding her of how long it had been since she'd had anything to eat. As she ate, the tension in her shoulders slowly began to ease. The quiet of the cabin, the warmth of the fire, and the steady presence of the bikers outside made her feel a little more at ease. But even as she tried to relax, her thoughts kept drifting back to her stepfather. What would happen when he came looking for her? Would the bikers be able to protect her? She tried to push the thoughts aside, but they kept creeping in. As the night went on, the bikers gathered in the main room, their voices low as they discussed their next move. Maya stayed in the corner, trying to stay out of the way. She wasn't part of their world, but she had nowhere else to go. Jack noticed her sitting alone and walked over to her, his expression softening when he saw the look on her face. "You're not alone, Maya," he said. "We're not going anywhere. You're safe here for now." Maya nodded, trying to believe him, trying to believe that everything would be okay. But deep down, the fear still lingered, and she wasn't sure when it would go away. The days that followed were a blur of quiet tension. The bikers had settled in, their presence in the cabin solidifying the sense of safety Maya had longed for, though the fear that her stepfather might find her never truly left. The mornings were filled with the bustle of the bikers preparing, checking their bikes, and making sure everything was in order, while the evenings were spent in quiet conversations around the fire. Maya spent much of her time inside, still too afraid to venture too far from the cabin. Clara was often by her side, talking to her gently and making sure she had everything she needed. But the looming fear was always there, a shadow hanging over her. One evening, as the sky began to darken, the tension in the cabin seemed to grow thicker. Jack, who had been outside speaking with the other bikers, entered with a serious expression. He nodded at Maya, giving her a reassuring smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "We need to move," he said quietly. Maya's heart sank. She had known this moment would come, but she wasn't ready for it. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Your stepfather's people are getting closer," Jack explained. "We've been keeping an eye on the town, and there are too many questions being asked. We need to relocate before it's too late." Maya's stomach twisted in fear. She thought they were safe here, tucked away in the woods, but she had been wrong. The danger was never far behind. "Where will we go?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "We have a few options," Jack replied, his voice steady but with an edge of urgency. "We've got some trusted contacts in the area. We'll be moving you to a more secure location, somewhere your stepfather won't find you." Maya looked at Jack, her heart racing. She didn't know what to feel. She wanted to trust him, to believe that they could keep her safe, but the fear that had been gnawing at her for so long was now overwhelming. She felt like she was being tossed around by a storm she couldn't control. "How soon do we leave?" she asked, trying to steady her breathing. "In the morning," Jack said, his tone firm. "We'll need to move quickly. The longer we stay here, the more likely it is that someone will track us down." Maya nodded, though the dread in her chest felt suffocating. She had no choice but to go with them. She couldn't go back to the life she had left behind, not with her stepfather out there, searching for her. That night, the bikers gathered, going over the plan for their departure. Maya sat by the fire, trying to absorb everything that was happening, but her mind kept circling back to the same thought. Was she ever going to be truly safe? Would she always be running, always looking over her shoulder? The questions hung heavy in her mind, but she forced them back as best as she could. She needed to stay focused on the present, on the people who had taken her in and promised to protect her. As the night wore on, Maya found herself in a deep conversation with Clara. The older woman had been a calming presence, and Maya was grateful for her support. "You're doing great," Clara said softly, her voice gentle as she spoke to Maya. "I know this isn't easy, but you've come so far." Maya nodded, her eyes brimming with tears. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice breaking. "What if he finds me? What if they can't keep me safe?" Clara reached out and placed a hand on Maya's shoulder. "He won't find you," she said with conviction. "We won't let him. You've got a whole family here now, Maya. A family that will protect you." The words felt like a balm on her wound, but the fear was still there, buried deep inside. She wasn't sure she could believe that everything would be okay, but Clara's words gave her a sliver of hope. The next morning, the bikers loaded up their bikes and prepared for the journey ahead. Maya stood at the door, watching them with a mixture of fear and gratitude. She didn't want to leave the cabin, but she had no choice. She had to keep moving, to keep running until her stepfather was no longer a threat. Jack approached her, his eyes softening when he saw the look on her face. "Ready?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. Maya took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. "I guess so," she said, though the uncertainty still hung in her chest. Jack gave her a small smile. "We've got this," he said. And though Maya wasn't sure if they really did, she followed him outside. The air was cool and crisp as the bikers started their engines, the sound of the motorcycles filling the morning air. The small cabin, once a place of refuge, now felt like a distant memory. As they rode off, the forest stretching out before them, Maya held on to Jack, trying to push the fear aside. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure. She couldn't do this alone. She needed these people. And for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she had a chance at a new life. The road ahead was unknown, but she was no longer running alone. The ride continued, the rumble of the bikes cutting through the quiet morning. Maya held on to Jack tightly, her heart still pounding with fear, but something had shifted inside her. She had been running for so long, constantly terrified, but now, with the wind against her face and the steady rhythm of the motorcycles around her, she began to feel a strange sense of determination. The road ahead was uncertain, but she wasn't alone. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel completely helpless. They rode for miles, the landscape changing from dense woods to open fields, the sky clear and bright above them. The bikers kept a steady pace, their eyes scanning the surroundings, making sure they weren't being followed. Maya could feel the tension in the air, but she also felt the unspoken bond between the group. These were people who had promised to protect her, people who would go to great lengths to keep her safe. She wanted to trust them completely, but the fear was hard to shake. They finally pulled off the road and into a secluded rest area. The bikers stopped, the sound of the engines fading as they dismounted. Maya stepped off the bike, her legs a little wobbly from the long ride, and looked around. It was a quiet spot, surrounded by trees, with a small stream running nearby. The bikers began to set up camp, unpacking gear and checking their bikes. Jack walked over to her, his expression serious. "We'll rest here for a bit. Make sure everything is in order," he said. "We'll keep moving after that. I know you're scared, but we're doing everything we can to keep you safe." Maya nodded, her stomach still in knots. She tried to focus on the beauty of the place, the sound of the stream, the chirping of birds in the trees, but her mind kept drifting back to her stepfather. What if he found them here? What if they couldn't keep her safe? Clara, who had been busy helping set up the camp, came over and sat next to Maya by the stream. "How are you holding up?" she asked, her voice gentle. Maya shrugged, not knowing how to explain the mix of emotions inside her. "I'm okay, I guess," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Clara looked at her kindly, her eyes full of understanding. "You've been through a lot," she said softly. "But you're strong. I know it's hard to see right now, but you're getting closer to being free. Every step you take is one more step away from the danger." Maya sighed, looking down at the water as it flowed gently past them. "I don't feel strong," she admitted. "I feel like I'm just running from one place to the next, never really getting away." Clara placed a hand on her shoulder. "You're not running. You're surviving. And that takes more strength than you know." Maya didn't respond, but she appreciated Clara's words. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to relax a little. The camp felt peaceful, and the bikers seemed to be on alert but also at ease. Maybe, just maybe, they had a chance of making it through this. Jack came over after a while, pulling Maya gently to her feet. "We need to move," he said. "We've got a safe house set up for tonight, but we need to get there before dark. We don't want to risk being caught out here." Maya nodded, trying to push down the anxiety rising in her chest. The fear of being caught was always there, gnawing at her, but she had no choice. She had to keep moving, keep trusting them. They packed up quickly, the bikers working like a well-oiled machine. Jack was giving out orders, making sure everyone knew their role, and Clara stayed close to Maya, offering a reassuring smile whenever she could. As they mounted their bikes once again, Maya glanced back at the small clearing where they had just stopped. It felt like such a brief moment of calm, but it was over. She was once again on the move. The sound of the engines roared to life, and the group sped off, cutting through the open fields and heading into the unknown. The sun was beginning to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the land. Maya kept her eyes on the road ahead, trying to push the thoughts of her stepfather out of her mind. She couldn't let fear control her anymore. She had to keep moving forward, one step at a time. As they rode through the winding roads, Jack's voice came over the radio, calm and reassuring. "Stay close, everyone. We're almost there. Just a few more miles." The ride seemed to stretch on forever, but Maya could feel the safety of the bikers around her. The world was still uncertain, but for the first time, she felt like she was part of something bigger than herself. Maybe, just maybe, there was hope. The group finally slowed down as they approached a small, secluded house at the edge of a forest. The house was modest, but it looked safe, tucked away from the world. Jack turned to Maya and gave her a small, reassuring smile. "We're here," he said. Maya didn't say anything, but she felt a sense of relief wash over her. They had made it this far. They had a place to rest, a place to be safe, at least for now. She climbed off the bike and followed Jack inside, her heart still racing but her mind beginning to calm. They had a place to stay, a chance to breathe. For the first time in what felt like forever, Maya let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she could start over. It wasn't over yet, but for now, she was safe. The cabin felt more like a home than anything Maya had experienced in a long time. The soft glow of the fire flickered in the corner, casting long shadows on the walls, and the warmth of the place seemed to embrace her, if only for a moment. She sat on the edge of the worn sofa, looking around the small room, taking in the calmness that contrasted so sharply with the chaos that had followed her. Jack had given her a room to herself, away from the hustle of the bikers as they settled into their new hideout. The house was simple, with only the essentials: a small kitchen, a few comfortable chairs, and a table cluttered with maps and radios. The bikers had started to set up their routine of shifts and patrols, keeping watch to make sure no one followed them. Despite the warmth inside the cabin, Maya couldn't shake the gnawing feeling of dread in the pit of her stomach. Her mind kept going back to her stepfather. What if he found them here? What if everything they'd worked for was in vain? Every time she closed her eyes, his angry face, twisted with rage, flashed in her mind. She had been running for so long, and even though she was with people who cared, the fear still had a grip on her heart. She was safe, for now, but how long would that last? As if sensing her unease, Clara entered the room with a small tray of food. The older woman set it down in front of Maya, her eyes warm but filled with concern. "You should eat," Clara said softly. "You've barely touched your meals today." Maya smiled faintly, but the weight of her worries made it hard to focus on anything else. "I'm not really hungry," she admitted, looking down at the plate in front of her. Clara sat down beside her. "I know you're scared, but you're not alone anymore. We're going to protect you." Maya's eyes filled with tears, and she quickly wiped them away, trying not to let the vulnerability show. She had to stay strong. She couldn't break down now, not when she was so close to being safe. "I just don't know what's going to happen," she whispered. "Every time I think I'm safe, something else happens. I don't know how much longer I can keep running." Clara reached out, gently taking Maya's hand. "You're not running anymore," she said, her voice steady and comforting. "We're not going to let anything happen to you. You're with us now, and we will make sure that you can live your life in peace. But you have to trust that we've got you." Maya nodded slowly, trying to absorb Clara's words. The doubt and fear were still there, like a shadow lingering in the corners of her mind. But Clara's unwavering assurance gave her a small sense of hope. For the first time, Maya allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something better. "Thank you," Maya whispered, her voice cracking. "I don't know what I would do without you." Clara smiled gently and squeezed her hand. "You're stronger than you know, Maya, and you're not alone." The words sank in as Maya sat back in her chair, looking around the room once more. The cabin, despite being so far removed from the life she had once known, suddenly felt like the safest place she had ever been. The fire crackled softly, and the voices of the bikers outside drifted in, low and steady, like a distant promise. She felt the exhaustion settle in, the weight of everything finally starting to catch up with her. Her mind had been racing, her heart constantly in turmoil, but now, in the quiet of the cabin, a sense of calm began to take over. She wasn't running anymore. She wasn't alone. And as the night stretched on, Maya allowed herself to close her eyes for the first time in what felt like forever. The fear was still there, but for tonight, she could finally rest. Just as she was about to drift off, there was a knock at the door. Maya startled, her heart racing, but Clara stood and went to answer it. Jack entered the room shortly after, his eyes scanning the cabin, sharp as always. "How's she doing?" he asked, his voice calm but alert. Clara gave a small nod. "She's resting. I think she's starting to settle in." Jack's gaze softened as he looked at Maya. "Good," he said. "We're moving out tomorrow, first thing. We need to make sure we're always one step ahead." Maya's heart skipped a beat at the thought of leaving again. She had just begun to feel safe here, and now they were moving again. "How far are we going?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack paused, his expression serious. "We've got a contact at a new location. It's more secure. We'll be moving fast, but we've got everything planned. The bikers will make sure we're covered." We'll get you where you need to be. Maya nodded, but the worry still lingered. She wanted to believe Jack, wanted to trust that they could keep her safe, but the fear of being found never truly left her. Jack noticed her hesitation and gave her a reassuring smile. You're with us. We'll protect you, no matter what. You're safe. Maya nodded again, her heart heavy, but she knew he was right. She had to keep moving, keep trusting them. She wasn't alone anymore, and maybe, just maybe, she could start to build a new life. The bikers were already making preparations, and soon, the cabin was quiet again, the air thick with anticipation. Maya sat by the window, watching the darkening sky, trying to imagine a future where she wasn't always running. She had no idea what would happen next, but she was no longer alone in this fight. And that was enough to keep her going. The next morning, the sense of urgency was palpable. Maya woke early, her mind immediately jumping to the reality of what lay ahead. The bikers were already moving, packing up their gear, and getting ready for the next phase of their plan. It was the same routine, but the tension was heavier this time. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were on borrowed time. Clara had come to check on her, bringing her a warm cup of coffee. How are you doing? She asked softly, sitting down next to Maya. Maya took a deep breath and smiled weakly. I'm trying to be okay, she said, though her voice betrayed the fear that was simmering just beneath the surface. Clara nodded, her expression understanding. You've been through a lot. It's okay to feel scared. But remember, you're not alone. We're not going to let anything happen to you. Maya glanced out the window at the bikers, who were now finishing their preparations. Her heart fluttered with anxiety. How long before we leave? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Clara looked at her, concern flickering across her face. Soon. We have to keep moving. The longer we stay in one place, the more likely it is that your stepfather will catch up to us. Maya nodded, her throat tight. She had learned to trust the bikers, but she still couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go wrong. It wasn't over. It wasn't safe. As Jack walked into the cabin, his eyes scanning the room, he caught Maya's gaze. We're ready to go, he said. Everything's set. We'll move in a few minutes. Maya's heart pounded in her chest as she stood up, her legs feeling shaky. Where are we going? She asked, trying to steady her breath. Jack paused for a moment, as if deciding how much to share. We're heading to another safe house. It's farther out, more secure. We'll have more space to move around, and it's a place your stepfather won't think to look. Maya tried to take comfort in his words, but the fear still gripped her. It wasn't just the journey ahead. It was the thought that her stepfather might be close, watching, waiting. I don't want to keep running, Maya admitted, her voice cracking. I don't want to be scared anymore. Jack's expression softened as he stepped closer to her. You're doing great, Maya. We're all in this together. You don't have to be afraid anymore. We're going to keep you safe. We just need to keep moving. Maya took a deep breath and nodded, trying to push the fear aside. She wasn't alone. The bikers had kept their word so far, and they wouldn't stop now. She followed Jack outside, where the others were mounting their bikes. The engines roared to life, a steady reminder of the journey they were about to take. Jack motioned for Maya to climb onto his bike, and she did, feeling the familiar vibration beneath her as they started moving. The landscape blurred past them as they sped down the road. Maya gripped Jack tightly, trying to stay focused on the road ahead. The fear was still there, gnawing at her insides, but she had to push it away. They were moving, and that was all that mattered. For now, at least. As they continued down the road, the trees began to thin out, replaced by open fields and rolling hills. The air felt cooler here, the breeze more refreshing, but the sense of unease still lingered. Maya's mind raced with thoughts of her stepfather. Was he still looking for her? Would they be able to stay ahead of him? Jack seemed to sense her anxiety and glanced over his shoulder. We're almost there, he said, his voice steady. Stay close. Maya nodded, trying to shake the tension in her chest. She wasn't sure where they were headed, but the bikers had promised to keep her safe. The sound of the engines filled the air as they continued their journey, their presence like a shield against the world. As the sun began to set, they pulled off the road and into another secluded area. Maya could feel the change in the atmosphere, the shift from the open road to the more confined space of their new location. It was a small, quiet area, far from the town, surrounded by thick trees and a sense of seclusion. Jack turned off the engine and helped Maya off the bike. We'll be staying here for the night, he said, his voice calm. Rest up. Tomorrow, we keep moving. Maya stood there for a moment, taking in the surroundings. The cabin in the distance looked like a place of peace, a temporary shelter, but it still didn't feel permanent. It wasn't home. It was just another stop, another place to keep moving from. Will we ever stop running? She asked, her voice barely audible. Jack turned to face her, his expression softening. You won't have to run forever, Maya. We're doing everything we can to protect you. But for now, we have to stay one step ahead. Maya nodded, trying to believe him. She had no choice but to keep moving forward, to trust in the people who had promised to protect her. As they made their way to the cabin, she felt a strange mixture of fear and hope. It wasn't over, but maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for a new beginning. The cabin doors closed behind her as the night settled in, and for the first time in days, she allowed herself to breathe, knowing she was not alone. She was surrounded by people who cared, and that was enough to keep her going. The days began to blend into each other. Maya had gotten used to the constant moving, the endless cycle of packing up and heading out to new, isolated places. The bikers were always on guard, their eyes scanning the horizon, their senses tuned to every sound in the distance. But Maya had begun to sense something else. Their protective vigilance was starting to feel like a permanent shield. It was the first time in months that she felt like she wasn't constantly running, constantly looking over her shoulder. The cabin they had reached in the woods felt more like home than any place she had ever been. It was small, but it was hers. She had a bed of her own, a window that let in the morning sunlight, and a group of people who made sure she never felt alone. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to rest. It wasn't that the fear had completely disappeared, but the constant panic had started to ease. It was as if, with each passing day, the weight on her shoulders became a little bit lighter. Jack had been keeping his word. He and the others stayed vigilant, but their protection was more than just physical. It was a feeling, a presence, something that surrounded her and gave her strength. One evening, after a long day of moving camp and checking their next route, Jack sat with her by the fire. They hadn't talked much about the future, but tonight, the silence felt like it was about to be broken. You know, Jack began, his voice calm but with a hint of warmth. We're getting closer to the point where you don't have to run anymore. Maya looked at him, her heart suddenly racing. What do you mean? She asked, her voice shaking slightly. Jack turned to her, his eyes steady. We've got a place set up, far from where your stepfather would think to look. It's secure and it's safe. He paused for a moment, then added, We've done everything we can to protect you, but you've done something too. You've stayed strong. You've made it this far. Maya felt her breath catch in her throat. It felt surreal, almost impossible to believe that this could be the end of her running. For so long, she had lived in fear of her stepfather's rage, of the idea that no matter where she went, he would find her. But now, for the first time, there was a glimmer of hope in her heart. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Jack smiled, a soft, reassuring smile. You don't have to say anything, he said. We're not going to let him get to you. You're safe now. You've made it. And that's all that matters. The fire crackled between them, the quiet of the night settling in around them. Maya felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. It was the warmth of safety, of belonging. For the first time in so long, she allowed herself to believe that maybe this was the beginning of something new, something better. As the days passed, the bikers continued to prepare for the final move to their secure location. Maya knew that the moment of peace they had now wasn't permanent. But she didn't need permanence. She needed to know that she wasn't alone anymore, that she wasn't just running. They had given her that, and it was enough. Finally, the day arrived. Jack and the others had made all the arrangements. The last stretch of the journey was ahead of them. Maya climbed onto the bike once again, her heart racing with a mixture of fear and anticipation. The road ahead was still uncertain, but now, it felt different. She wasn't running from her past anymore. She was moving forward, toward a future where she could breathe, where she could be herself. The engines roared to life, and the group set off together, riding in formation. Maya could hear the steady hum of the engines, the sound of safety in every rev. The wind rushed past her, and for the first time in months, she allowed herself to smile. The road stretched ahead, and with every mile, the fear that had held her captive for so long started to fade. It wasn't over yet, and she knew it. But for the first time in a long time, Maya allowed herself to hope. The journey wasn't just about escaping anymore. It was about finding something worth fighting for, something worth living for. And as the bikers sped down the open road, she knew she had found it. She wasn't alone anymore. And maybe, just maybe, she could have a future of her own. As they approached the new safe house, the familiar weight of fear that had plagued her for so long was no longer crushing her. Instead, it was replaced with the hope that she could finally build the life she had dreamed of. The engine slowed as they turned into the driveway, and the sound of the bikes faded away. They had made it, and Maya was finally home.